The first thing we're going to talk about is constructs and what constructs are and why they're so difficult to measure. In the natural sciences, measurement is usually pretty easy. If you think about what they're measuring in physics or chemistry or biology, they're often measuring things like mass, volume, weight, reaction time. These are pretty standardized things to measure and pretty easy to assign numbers to those values. When we're talking about measuring human outcomes or employee outcomes, they're not easy to put a single number on. So, for example, we often talk about the importance of charisma in leadership, right? We want charismatic leaders. How do you even begin to define what charisma is or to put a number on charisma? It is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And we call those human outcomes that we're interested in, we call them constructs. So charisma is a construct, leadership is a construct, job satisfaction is a construct, job performance is a construct. And so we use this word to signify these complex clusters of thoughts, feelings, behavior, culture. And we try to put a number on these incredibly complex things, and it's a very difficult thing to do. So for example, how do we measure something like job performance? And this is literally something organizational psychologists have been trying to figure out for like 100 years. If we take a job like, say you're a salesperson and your job is making sales. In that case, we can say, okay, it's pretty easy. Let's look at their sales volume per month, and that's reflective of their performance. But even that isn't really, right? Because you can be an amazing salesperson and, it's economic times or bad economic times, and so your sales drop. That's not about your job performance, that's about the economy. Or you're put into a bad geographical region. You're a great salesperson, but there's just not the customer base there. So that's not your job performance. And even if your sales are great, how well do you get along with your coworkers? How well do you get along with your supervisor? Do you get a lot of repeat customers, or are you treating customers badly? So you get one really big sale, but you're ruining repeat business. All of those things are part of job performance, right? It's really hard to put a single number and say, okay, your job performance is a 7 out of 10. And that's in the instance of when we're talking about a job where there's these clear objective outcomes. For most of us, our jobs don't have those clear objective outcomes like they do in sales, so it's even more difficult. Now, to get through the complexity of measuring a lot of the human outcomes that we're interested in, we rely on self-report. So if we're measuring something like attitudes, like job satisfaction, for example, we'll just ask people, how satisfied are you with your job? And there's a few problems with that. One is that self-reports are subjective. So if you ask me what my job satisfaction is on like a 1 to 5 scale, and I say 4 and you say 4, do we know that those 4s mean the same thing? Do we know that my level 4 job satisfaction is the same as your level 4 job satisfaction? Are we interpreting that question in the same way? Is there any way to know that? There's really not, right? Because we're measuring something that is inherently subjective. Another big problem with self-reports is that we lack self-awareness. So for example, if I were to give a survey to you and to all of your friends and family, and it asks questions like how funny you are, how likable you are, how good looking you are, how intelligent you are, your responses would be slightly higher than the average of your friends and family. We tend to see ourselves in a slightly more positive light than everyone else does. And so when you use self-report, you're not always getting an objective answer from people. People are motivated to see themselves in the best light possible. By the way, that's culturally influenced. So in a lot of Asian cultures, you actually see the opposite pattern where humility is really valued in those cultures. And so you see people rating themselves slightly below what their friends and family think. But regardless, either scenario, you're not getting an objective, accurate picture of who someone is. And then another problem with self-reports is that we lie. So often, especially in an organizational setting, you know what answer is expected of you, and you answer in line not with how you actually feel or what you actually think, but what you believe you are expected to feel or think. And so we lie on self-report measures as well. And so we use self-report measures to kind of get through some of the complexity of measuring the really difficult to measure employee outcomes that we're interested in. And yet there's a lot of drawbacks of using that self-report methodology.